While we're working out how to turn an easy goth, thanks everybody for coming down tonight. Yeah, nice little crowd, and thanks youth for jumping in on this. Yeah, so what we're going to do, it's always been a bit too boring just to talk about a book and writing a book, that's too dull. We're going to work out the art of darkness, and somebody who's been involved in a journey into the heart of the art of darkness. That's you, isn't it? So let's kind of unravel the sort of layers of this. And I mean, you have quite a lot of esoteric interests. I mean, not all of them are dark, of course, you know, but they're esoteric and interesting, and they sort of link into art, and art's part of the journey into it. And is that something you were always interested in, or something you got pulled into as your teenage years?
Good question, John. Yeah. Evening, everybody. As well. I have no idea. I mean, I think it chooses you, and then you have to, you know, pick up the baton or not. You know. But I think you can choose it if you really want to will it through. I mean, it works in many ways, doesn't it? But I think with what we call goth, it's totally connected to all of that.
I mean, this is going to be quite a boring question, but you obviously you never thought of yourselves as being a goth band. There's no such thing. But you were quite part of the scene as well, weren't you? You know, you went to the Batcave, you knew all the bands. Yeah. Killing Joke are one of the pillars of the scene that they probably don't feel like they're actually in. I mean, what's your actual personal relationship with it?
Well, I mean, I missed first wave punk a bit. So 78, 79, we started Killing Joke, and we're getting busy, and so that was the beginning of post-punk, I suppose. And then out of that, but again, it wasn't called post-punk though. And then there was the New Romantic thing on the Blitz Club, which preceded Batcave, which is very different, but also very similar, and the same crowd. But that was called New Romantic at the time, but nobody there called themselves New Romantics, I don't think, apart from maybe Spandau Ballet. But certainly, I mean, but that was rife with infighting. They all, you know, they didn't like Gary Newman. They were like fussy about what was what. But then when the Batcave came out, again, no one was calling it goth. I mean, that's a Paul Morley origin, isn't it?
Well, the word goth or gothic it's been around. I mean, the first band to be called gothic was actually the Doors in 1966.
Yeah.
It's in the book, but
yeah.
I mean that, which is very fitting, isn't it? Because the Doors, a lot of stuff we're probably going to do here, probably a lot of it stems from Jim Morrison's interest.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting angle on it, because what we now call goth is, you know, it's great you start the book with the Visigoths and that whole thing after the fall of Rome, but even, you know, Romantics, which is another element of goth with the writer Shelley, I think that name comes from Romans, right? It's an association with Rome, and not only that, with the Gothic architecture and Gothic literature is very Catholic, so it's very Italian, Spanish. You know, they really get it, and they still really get it. And I think what that is, even though it's that on the surface, it's a kind of thin veneer. And then if you scratch a bit further, it's actually a remnant of a more ancient tradition of, you know, you could call it Dionysian, you could call it triple goddess. It's a kind of it's a sex and death cult, like Christianity is in a weird way. So all those things are quite connected, and with the Dionysian element of it, it's Dionysian in the context I mean is the opposite to Apollonian, which is the Western culture today. You could say is Apollonian. It's rational, it's regimented, it's linear, it's specific. Dionysian is the other side of that. It's poetic. It celebrates death and darkness. It's kind of goddess muse based. It's about visions and all the things that we love about goth, actually. So,
I mean, in the book I've got a great quote from Iggy Pop, which I saw on a TV program, an American chat show, where he just explains that to this completely baffled-looking host. And Iggy's at his most kind of druggy, wildest, eyes out and stalks, but he's explaining the Apollonian and the Dionysian.
That's not the Morkboy Iggy Pop quote they used on their album.
I think it is, because I think it's a time.
He's talking about punk rock.
Yeah, and he's talking about how he's a mixture of the two, but more Dionysian.
Absolute genius. I mean, he's incredibly articulate, Iggy. And because his persona was so dumb, it completely screwed up a lot of writers and TV guys because they weren't expecting it.
It's the genius of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've talked about this a few times.
Yeah.
These things. I mean, the Doors are probably half about, but what he did, he saw the Doors when he was at university.
Yeah.
But he reduced all Jim Morrison's poetry to 2 words, no fun.
Yeah.
Which is perfect.
Oh, wow, I've never heard that. That's amazing. I've never heard that.
What else do you need to say in rock and roll?
Wow, that's great. I would never even have thought Iggy would have been into the Doors, but of course, when you mention it, it makes sense.
I found this amazing website for when he was his university website, nothing to do with the Stooges, saying, do you remember that James Osterberg, how transfixed he was on the Doors when they played the gig at our college? And the Stooges' first gig was 11 days later. So going back to the Dionysian thing, was it, and what you talk about the layers and going to see goddesses, etc. This all plays out in Killing Joke, and is there a sense when Killing Joke came together that, well, you know, was it something that kind of drew you together? Could you feel that there was that similar kind of interest from the other members in this, or?
Well, interesting. I had a conversation recently with Jazz about it. I was talking to him more about Robert Graves and White Goddess, and I said, I think the thread that's gone throughout all of our work, Jazz, is the triple goddess. He was like, yes, straight away. So, I mean, I think it is there. But nevertheless, before I even joined the band, I mean, Jazz and Paul had been members of the Golden Dawn at 14.
Yeah. And Paul done rituals in Wickham, in Town Square.
I think so. And you know that they'd done a ritual a ceremony ritual to find me and Geordie. So the band came out of that kind of magic.
So when you walked in the room the first time, did you feel this is not, because you've been in bands before, you toured around UK, supporting the adverts, etc. And that being fun, and that's a punk rock band. Do you think you're going to join a punk rock band, or do you feel this strange, I must go to this room, and you went in there and it's like, wow, this is not...
It wasn't like that. There was an ad, and I phoned the ad up, and then I said, I think Geordie answered. I said, come over to my bed set, and I was quite late. I thought I was auditioning them. They thought they were auditioning me.
Has that ever been resolved?
No. So, eventually, Geordie came around to my bed set, and I had a 3-string guitar in there, and he refused to play. He said, look, you're going to have to come up to Charlton, we're rehearsing up there, Jazz's mum's up there. And I was like, okay, maybe. And in the end, I went up there, and we did this rehearsal, and famously, Jazz and Paul kind of looked at each other while we were doing the first sort of jam, and walked out, went down the pub. And they were like, oh, he can't play, it's not going to work. And left me and Geordie in the room. Me and Geordie just started playing this one note thing. And then when they were in the pub, they saw some friends and they went, oh, well, how's the new bass player? And just went, yeah, it's great. Can we come down? So it came down with a few friends and we're playing this just one note thing, really intense. And it was just like a movie, and just Paul went over to the drums, we didn't stop playing. Jazz went on the keyboard. Boom, that was our first song. And I was about to be kicked out before I'd even joined.
But you managed to get in with one note. Yeah.
Apparently.
Very good note.
Yeah. But I think, you know, it's like astrologically, you know, I kind of fulfill the opposites to what they are in many ways, you know, and I wasn't really interested in anything esoteric or magic, or I used to take the piss out of them relentlessly when we started. It was only when I had my LSD meltdown at 21 that suddenly everything started to become magical and shamanic, and that's when I tapped into that. And one of the first things I really tapped into on that was actually Jim Morrison and the Doors, because he exemplified that Dionysian darkness, and goddess elements. And yesterday I was playing around with some mixing some of his poetry with drones, and I was like, wow, yeah, I mean, it's as much as he was criticised for that, that's what I really love about him.
What, the words themselves, or
just his...
Or what he's aiming at?
What he's aiming at, and the words themselves actually stand up pretty good, I think. And his whole kind of Lizard King shamanic persona and its fearlessness and just putting that out there. I mean, obviously it's tragic he died early, but, you know, it's strange to think both him and Hendrix died at 27, right?
Were you nervous at 27?
I think I had my sort of metaphorical death at 21 on the King's Road, burning money and getting banged up in a nut house for a couple of weeks. But 27, no, I wasn't worried about it. I'd gone through it by then, and I think I'd already been prepared for that with the life before. But I think it was just good timing, you know, and then at that point, that would be in 81, 82, that was when the Batcave was just emerging and all this amazing stuff was emerging. But again, even at the Batcave, you know what I'm like, John, I'm quite reactionary. So, like with punk, I go out dressed like a rocker for the top half, and then bondage trousers on the bottom, because...
Well, that's a good look. That was good.
I thought it looked great.
77.
But, yeah, 78, that was, 77, 78. But of course, you know, I did end up getting chased a lot, and people would say, oh, you're letting the side down, you know. And I'm like, I don't care. For me, punk rock's always about being different, not being the same. And as soon as the identikit thing happened...
It's very Apollonian in a sense.
In a way, yeah.
It was meant to be chaos.
Yeah, I kind of avoided it. So similarly with the Batcave, when it all became black and the bats were coming out, and everybody was doing the Nick Cave back home, you know, I went the other way, and I was getting into hip-hop culture. I'd turn up in tennis shorts and visors, and... But actually, the scene was very inclusive at the time. So you would have people from all the other club splits and lots of other scenes, and nobody would give anybody any grief that I can see.
That's always when a scene's at its best, isn't it, before anybody's formalised what it's about, isn't it? I mean, what I tried to do in the book was actually deconstruct it back again, so just chuck all the ideas up in the air and see what lands, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think it's like on a cultural level that it's when the shadow and the darkness becomes important is when the light has let you down. So, like when the politics of the day has left you as a generation on the scrap heap, or you know things like nuclear politics at the time, all of that allowed you. You couldn't find music that spoke to you in the charts at the time. So the music that spoke to us of our experience was the darker, more underground, underbelly stuff.
So I mean, was that what you were trying to articulate in Early Killing Joke as well, when you before your meltdown?
No, I don't think we were trying to be anything.
So was it more intuitive?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you sort of think we have to make something that reflects anything. Of course, nobody ever does that, do they? But it just came out that way. You were trying to be something completely different, but it still comes out like Killing Joke.
We all had our own ideas of what it should be, but when we actually played together, it was something else that nobody expected, and not all of us wanted, you know. But that's what it was, and that's the magic of it. But you know, it's I wasn't saying to Jazz, can you go more Jim Morrison here or anything like that, you know. It was just, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, you know, put it together.
I think that's a very defining thing about a lot of post-punk and a lot of stuff in the gossip. A lot of bands I wrote about in this book, because everybody in every band seems to be playing something different at the same time. But somehow it works, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's often those naive mistakes are what actually draw people in.
Everyone's playing lead as well. I mean, the bass didn't tuck in the back, did it? Like,
well, that's right. But it was a good time for bass. Because guitar solos were out the window. You know? But a nice melodic bass run, that was considered a melancholy one, you know. And Peter Hook was the master of that chorus.
Yeah. You toured with them, didn't you?
We did, yeah, and that was mind-blowing thinking about it. And
it's mind-blowing thinking the two bands being on one bill. I mean, that's a couple of doses of intensity there.
Yeah, and so quite different, but actually worked very well. Yeah.
So when you had the meltdown and you started to sort of reappreciate the doors, I mean, was that like a door, literally a door, into all the other ideas of the poets? Did you kind of go down the whole trip, or was it this a gradual process?
Yeah, I mean, I got totally immersed in poetry, bardic, druidism, all of that took on a whole other level, and then music around me that was resonating on that level took on a level as well. But,
so what was the music that was resonating on that level?
Well, coming out of that, I was, it was a weird mashup of New York electro, early hip hop meets, sort of psychedelic folk, incredible string band, traditional folk music really resonated with me, blues, sort of, things that had a kind of adulterated
purity,
clarity to it of authenticity.
Why was this resonating with you at the time? You trying to like almost piece yourself back together from a meltdown?
Yeah, I think it just came across as authentic. Where I was surrounded by a lot of what I thought was plastic fake. But I quite like the plastic fake as well. I mean, a lot of those early hip hop, electro, New York records, totally plastic, but yeah, great.
Yeah, well, they're like folk music of their time now, aren't they? So the equivalent to you having a meltdown now, look at that as a folk music.
Yeah.
But so was it lyrically as well, like the folk stuff, like the hip hop, very lyrical types of music?
I mean, and also, weirdly enough, you'd see that coming in on the dance floor at the Batcave. I mean, the Batcave was really important because of two DJs, Rusty Egan and Hamish MacDonald. And Hamish, particularly, would bring in things that became like all about even, sort of kind of those folky, even Cult Sanctuary had this kind of acoustic folky romanticism to it, and that was very different, starkly different from 2-3 years earlier with punk. So that all started creeping onto the dance floor via a drum machine, and that was really interesting. You could see the scene was kind of going into these different areas that no one had really gone to. And I think after punk, nobody knew where it was going to go either. I mean, what were you doing at that time? Did you go to the Batcave at some time?
No, I was in Blackpool, so we
Yeah.
had a little, very small version of it,
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the interesting things I found in the book was a lot of people doing really interesting stuff in the small towns, pre-internet, convergent evolutions, like when you think Bauhaus come out of Northampton, I don't know if anybody here is from Northampton or been to Northampton, but not what goes on there. And the idea that them four actually even live there, but end up in a band together, and come up with Dollar Goes Dead, their first rehearsal, it's quite mind-blowing. So in a way, you didn't have to be in the back of London.
Sure, I mean,
it's hip, really.
I think the North, East and West, were totally perfect for the beginnings of goth. And, if you think about, who else was there at the time that was coming? I mean, I'd go down the Batcave with Zodiac, Mind Warp, who was from Bradford, right, and Buzz, who was from Southern Death Cult, Bradford again, I think, and Aki, who was a drummer. They're all from Bradford, actually, and they're all living in London, and maybe David Spat as well, and they. But none of us looked like goths, actually. Buzz had really long hair down here on one side. Zodiac looked like a Hell's Angel. And I looked like, just tennis shorts and stuff. But it's kind of worked, But it totally resonated with the northern vibe, I thought.
I think it's interesting that people manage to find the same answers to the same question in different places without knowing what each other are doing. So you have the submersive leads. I mean, there's a big argument there that the phone knows before. Talk about it with someone before, that guy there.
And Futurama, of course.
Which was amazing.
Well, it was bleak.
It was bleak, but it's amazing. He managed to pull off a festival in Leeds in that time when there was no festivals in Britain. Like now, was every city has a festival.
That's true. No one had done that. It was visionary.
John Keenan was the architect of the Leeds punk scene. You know, he created. He lost a fortune on it all. You know, but he made it happen. You know? And we managed to enjoy Sheffield all electronic music. It's all. You think Cabaret Voltaire in Sheffield in 1974, cutting up tapes and making that music.
Amazing.
Who they think he was going to listen to it? I mean, I'm all Genesis, you know, PRH up in Hull University.
Yeah, and actually, at the same time, pretty much, you had Soft Cell, maybe a little bit later, the Normal.
Same time as
78, 79, right?
Yeah, because he was DJing the same clubs as well.
So
Claire Shearsby.
That's where we were bleeding to, you know, coming out of the Roxy into Blitz and Billy's. Billy's was the Bowie club. So Bowie was a big figure for a lot of those people. But also punk, it's weird because punk was quite innocent in many ways. Most of the people in punk were like in their late 20s. And, you know, I was 16 in 1977. So, you know, there weren't that many kids my age around then. They're all a bit older. And they all had this kind of like, a little bit prudish attitude, like John Lydon going, I'd rather have a cup of tea than sex. You know, it was more about sort of like a community and drugs but weirdly enough, by the time it got to the Batcave, it definitely had let its hair down a bit, and it's still very British, so it's still going to be a little prudish, but it got a bit more like sexy and. You know, a lot more girls were involved, a lot more girls in bands, and people would dress up, and you know, and then you go out, and then there was this whole S&M scene bleeding into it, and you go to Skin 2 afterwards, and which would be open a bit later. So things, again, on a more Dionysian, Bacchanalian level, kind of loosening up, and people were letting their hair down.
And do you like that? Of course. Well, who wouldn't?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because I kind of didn't do that with punk, really.
You kind of hoping punk was going to be like that, and it was a bit too like the military.
Well, you'd think it would have been with all the sort of the look with the sort of PVC mini skirts ripped, you know, nylon stockings and stuff. But that was actually a feminist statement against pervy city guys, you know. So those people weren't dressing up like that to be sexy. They were doing that as a political feminist statement. So you as being part of that, you wouldn't respond to that in that way. You know, it would be uncool to do that.
Well, whereas 2-3 years later, goalposts have shifted a bit. So or have they?
I think so. Because, you know, punk descended into heroin and stuff very quickly in London with the Heartbreakers turning up and stuff. And yeah, I think, you know, with the Batcave again, that was a bit more amphetamine fueled. But again, with those sort of drugs, that actually takes the sting out of the sexual tail a bit. So people just end up yapping all night long in someone's kitchen. And again, it's a little naive and innocent, which is endearing as well, you know.
So you've got this kind of sort of decadent side, which is great. So obviously, at the same time, you're doing the spiritual search, aren't you? So, one, how do you fit that in? And two, how do the two sort of combine? You know, so you go towards, even though you're taking the piss out of the magic side, you'll get more interested in that. And you're going towards the Druidism as well. You're touching your spiritual side yourself. Was that the acid that started that? Was that just...
It was, yeah, absolutely. And definitely my bandmates got their revenge. Before I actually had the meltdown, I was still tripping for about a month without taking anything. And I was going, look, I had this thing where I was like, trying to whisper. If we whisper, we'll be able to understand each other. And I said, look, we'd have a band meeting. I was like, everybody's got to whisper. And we've got to put our fingers in brackets. And if we really focus on something, and I say, look, and they go, and then I go, look outside that window. do it, and it would. And then,
Oh my God! Back it up!
what's going on? And you know, some weird cosmic stuff was really happening. But yeah, I was in a very vulnerable, open, sort of naive place with it, which probably, you know, how I survived. I think my tarot card often when I do the tarot is the Fool, you know, which is the 0 card, and the Fool is just sort of stumbles into things, you know, and that's been my journey really.
Quite fitting for a band called Killing Joke as well.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
So I mean, what was it like to be in a hallucinogenic state in a band like Killing Joke? I mean, I actually find Killing Joke quite psychedelic, even the earlier records. But were they quite dark, sort of trips?
Yeah. Well, you know, there was a big psychedelic scene at the time. Killing Joke was starting to blow up, and I go out to the gig, and the big guy by the toilets and go acid ash, and loads of people will be buying acid. I thought, God, people taking acid to us. They're insane.
Then you tried.
But then I started doing it myself actually, and I did a whole German tour, and I had a girlfriend. She gave me a little quarter trip every night, like microdosing, which I think was very irresponsible because that led to my overall meltdown eventually. But it certainly made the gig more fun and the live show better.
Well, what did it make the music? Did the music sound different to you when you were playing it, when you were tripping?
Oh yeah. I mean it is very psychedelic. You know?
I've tripped it.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it unless you're a serious astronaut. But I mean, no, it's beautiful. I mean, there's some beautiful layers and tones within Killing Joke. You just wouldn't think of them as being a psychedelic band, but we were actually.
Very psychedelic.
Yeah, and we'd have a lot of the Hawkwind crowd come and see us, and you know, we want to make it like that as well because we were stoners. You know, we wanted it. We wanted people to get a psychotropic experience from it, for sure.
So how does that lead on to the more spiritual trips then? You know, when you know you have your breakdown, you're trying to glue yourself back together. But was that like that these doors are opening all the time to like different experiences and different like mindsets?
I was lucky in that I had 2 or 3 friends when I got, you know, banged in the mental hospital. They come up every day. One was Brian Barrett, who was written a book with Timothy Leary, who was considered the British Leary. And then we had Dave the Wizard, who blew fire at Killing Joke gigs. And he'd come up and he'd give me a crystal and he'd go, "You're not mad, just focus on the crystal. You know, keep whispering." And he lived in our squat at the top of our house, and he had a 7-pointed star tattooed on his face, never wore shoes, had a stray dog called Heldon, and 18 stray cats, and he'd always do a ritual, cast a circle in chalk on the dance floor and blow fire at the gig. And he had his own kind of weird druid, you know, sort of theology really. It wasn't anybody else's, but it had a bit of this and a bit of that. And he was had a very big heart, and he came and see me like every other day. He'd turn up, and you know, I was only in that hospital for 2 weeks, and it was what got me out was, you know, when you're mad, when you're having a psychotic experience like that, I was going, "No, I'm not mad, you're mad." You know, to everyone about everything, to my bank manager when I was burning money in his office, you know. And he gave me this crystal once and he said, "Meditate on this tonight." And I was up before a board of doctors about whether they're going to section me. And in this meditation, these sort of spirit guides came to me, and there's some of those spirit guides are still with me today. And they said, "Look, when you go before this panel of doctors tomorrow, don't say you're mad and oh, I'm not mad. Just say, I've had some LSD, I'm tired, I want to go home and see my mum." Yeah. And they'll let you go. So that's what I did, and they let me go.
Yeah, it's a good tip.
But the next day we went up to Wales into a cottage and started writing Killing Jokes there. And Jazz would start brewing up a cauldron of 500 mushrooms for everyone. But actually, I stopped taking hallucinogens for a few years.
Why was that? Because you felt like you'd had enough?
Because I just
got enough out of it.
Had my ego well and truly shredded, and I'd come out of it. I mean, when we went to Germany with Connie Plank to do the film, I look at my bass, it's just a bit of wood with some metal now. I don't know what that's about. But it was only, if I think about it, it's only like 7 years after that, I first went to Goa. And then I had a house in Goa for 10 years, and I started taking LSD again. But with an informed, kind of a little bit more responsible attitude, although it was totally free there. And, that was the birth of a whole other thing, psychedelic trance and everything. But, that gap, 6, 7 years, I had to try and rebuild my persona. I'd left the band. My second band had collapsed. I'd just begun producing with Alien Sex Fiend from the back end. And, I had to really begin a whole new journey.
You're quite a different person though when you get to Goa. Or is it just because the vibe of Goa is quite different? I'm imagining taking hallucinogenics in Killing Joke in that period of time, in a very sort of dark, you talk about the nuclear politics. It was a dark time really. Not a great time, I suppose, for a sensitive young man to be taking lots of acid in the right place. Whereas in Goa, would there be, could you see that as a bit more of a magical place, a bit more looser?
Yeah, but a little more upriver, So, if you lost it there,
you weren't going to get any advice.
It's going to be harder to get back home.
There's a few there, and there's a few people from the 60s.
Oh man, I go to this banyan tree by a lake in Arundel, and they had this Datura Baba. There's this Indian guru who had a few acolytes around it. And they smoke these Datura chillums, which Datura is a very strong psychedelic. You don't really come down from either. So people be warned about, careful about accepting a chillum from that bubble. And two of those guys in that tree with him were these Oxford academics who'd been there 4 or 5 years.
In the tree?
Yeah. And I'm like, when are you going home now? I don't know. I lost my passport 5 years ago. We're here, we're not going anywhere. That's how far out people go in there,
Well, did you smoke the pipe?
No, I didn't. No.
So you were smart enough then?
Yeah, I was a little more discerning at that point because of what I've been through, but it was that experience that actually brought me there. The experience of the meltdown on the King's Road was, if I hadn't had that, I probably wouldn't have gone to Goa. And actually, a few years in Goa, then Ollie Wisdom turns up from the back gate. And he'd been in Thailand for 5 or 6 years.
He was a big DJ.
Yeah, he started reinventing himself as a proto-trance DJ. So, I mean, it was a weird set of serendipities that brought all of that together in India. But actually, if you think about Jim Morrison, Doors, the whole thing, it makes a lot of sense. And actually, Goa was this psychedelic community, quite lawless, where people could take acid all the time and not be hassled or bothered by it.
I mean, was it just the party scene there, or were you going into the art of darkness, but the Indian version as well? There's that kind of there's a spirituality to India. There's also the dark sort of spirituality as well. Did that fascinate you?
Yeah, I love a good cult.
Yeah. So what kind of cults were you?
Oh, there were good cults in Goa. There's this guy called the Bok, who had these 2 little devil horns on his head. And he had an alternative history of the world, and it was this totally pure LSD kind of psychology spin, and history was his story. And you'd see his acolytes in sort of cafes around different villages gathering, there'd be 30 of them, and then the Bok would be talking. And they ended up trying to dig out this temple in Denmark. A few of my friends, and the guy put on some good pies. But it was a sex and death cult. Again, there were a lot of rumours. I was quite into that, actually. And yeah, I think, I've got a few books, so many good stories from India at that time. There's a good movie around the block, I think. I don't think it's around anymore, but yeah, and there were other cults as well.
So what is it about cults? Just fascinating because it's an alternative way of thinking.
Yeah.
Or is it just because you're trying to find something?
Well, what was great about India in that time, you know, you have a lot of what they call sannyasins, Westerners going to different gurus in India, Sai Baba, Osho. You go to the ashram. I mean, first time I went to India, I did 6 months on my own, going to all the ashrams, and I recommend it. It's a good way of finding out who you are, what you like, you know, what you don't like.
What did you find?
I didn't find the enlightenment I thought I was going to find. The best one I went to, although I'm still into some of those gurus, I quite like Osho, quite like a lot of them. But the best one was actually, I'd taken a wrong turn, and I thought I was going to this ashram. I thought it was a Maharishi TM one up near Benares, and I'd gone the wrong turn, turned into what I realised later on was this leper colony.
I know it. It's by the Monkey Temple.
It's close to a Monkey Temple, yeah. There was this, but the profound thing that happened to me there was a guy at the gate, and he said, yes, what can we do for you? You know, I said, well, I'd like to come and spend some time in the ashram. He's like, it's not an ashram. And then I looked at him, and I realised he didn't have any fingers, or half a hand, and bits of and he had this beautiful actual blue eyes. And I thought, my God, this guy's got so much dignity. He's got way more dignity than I have. And I don't deserve to be here, you know. And he said, you're very welcome to come. I ended up staying there a couple of days, and then when I left, I got a really good lesson from that, of just, you know, gratitude and how lucky can I be. And you know what we're like in our 20s, oh God, I've got a spot, oh my God, I can't go out. You know, it's pathetic really, but those are the experiences that like brought me back to earth, I think. And then, so you'd have all these kids coming down at Christmas, which is the height of the season, you'd have all these kids coming down from the ashrams. They've done 6 weeks, 7 weeks, you know, my pastoral retreat's not talking to me. They come down to have a party in Goa at Christmas, and then Goa would be full of like, all these international drug dealers, all these, you know, people from Japan. You know, it was a complete pirate, you know, kind of mashup of people, and it was under the radar, and people would chuck your cameras away or break them if you brought them out at a party. But it was a combination of a lot of those sannyasins wouldn't take drugs, and there's all these other kids taking buckets of drugs, and parties would go on for 2 days. So, you know, it was an amazing mixture of people, and collision of different things and stuff. And of course, with the music, even though it was a very generic, small bandwidth sound, you'd hear bits of Jim Morrison and Timothy Leary. Ollie had this one track called You Could Be Shiva, which would have Leary going out, you could be Shiva, you could be Ganesh, you could be now. And I mean, if you're like off your absolutely flying on a liquid California LSD, and that's coming out 4 speakers, and you're like, oh my God. Yeah, I mean, really could.
I am Ganesh.
Yeah, I mean, those samples could really affect you. So people were experimenting in different ways, but there was no real, you know, it was a collaboration of tribes and people. Nobody was running it in any one way, and some parties were.
And is this what you've been looking for in music when you were a teenager?
I was always looking for that. I missed 60s Summer of Love. I would have loved to be there for that. But we had punk rock, and then just before Goa, we had acid house, which was pretty amazing. But I wasn't that into actually, and I was still a bit cautious about psychedelics at that point.
Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah. Later on, I mean, yeah, I was a little more cautious in Goa with LSD, but I haven't taken LSD for 12 years. I still like mushrooms and some psychedelics, but LSD, I don't I've really done it.
So with the mushrooms, because it's more natural, you felt more comfortable with it?
Well, not necessarily. Sometimes the mushroom trips can be the darkest and the hardest, you know.
But would you embrace that darkness, or would it be difficult, or would it be something that was actually a good kind of lesson?
We had a thing with my friends at the party was, if we were doing like a lot of parties, like 3 parties a week, we would delegate one of us to be the responsible adult, and they wouldn't take acid, and they would make sure everyone was sorted out, and get you a cup of tea or gin and tonic, anything you wanted. And, you know, that'd be a 10-hour gig. But when it was my turn to do that, I really enjoyed it. Because I like looking after people. And I'm pretty good at it as well. And it was just, that was another level of responsibility that I hadn't seen anywhere else. You had someone in your corner looking out for you. And that really helped you get through the night. Ideally today, it's the ayahuasca phenomena, and you'd have a proper shaman, and they navigate you through your shadow and help you bring up those dark corners in a gentle, responsible way. You know, a rave on a beach in Goa is going to be a whole other experience, but it will bring up a lot of stuff. You know,
it's interesting you mentioned shaman. Of course, Jim Morrison's interested in the shaman.
Yeah.
There's songs and poetry about it, but you could see that in a lot of the music we talk about in this book as well, especially in Killing Joke. Obviously, your singer does have a shamanistic kind of tendency, or kind of feel on stage, but not just him, the whole band, isn't it? It's different, isn't it? It's a rock and roll group, of course, but there's something quite different about what you do. And is that conscious? Does it sort of go into those areas live?
Yeah, I think some of it is, totally, yeah.
You know, to take people on a trip. It's great, you could dance to Killing Joke, great, but it's somewhere else, isn't it?
But also the way the songs are written musically and with the lyrics. Paul and Jazz will be doing the lyrics, and they kind of work on a ceremonial level. They're not about, you know, going out to see a gig at the weekend or something. They do go into the deeper recesses of our psyches and personalities. I think for Jazz, you know, he'd had such a difficult childhood. You know, it was a way of expressing all of that confusion and his anger at the hypocrisy of society. He could do that very eloquently through the lyrics of Killing Joke, and we can all relate to it, you know, that's very shamanic.
I mean, what do you want people to achieve from going to a Killing Joke gig? I mean, of course, all different things, you know, just have a good time, dance, or to actually, in the words of Jim Morrison, to break on through to the other side. Is that the ultimate aim?
Our aims are towards what we want to get out of it personally, first and foremost.
Which is?
Well, that can be different things. We always do a little ceremony before we go on stage and ask for the blessing of the spirit at that time and place, and those questions might be a personal or more universal thing. But it changes, and I think that's part of our process. But again, you know, I come from Druidry and, you know, shamanic native traditions. Jazz and Paul and Geordie got more of the Western magical traditions. In the Western magical tradition, like Freemasonry, magical orders, it's really about summoning and commanding these legions of angels and demons and getting them to do your will, you know. Now, as opposed to the shamanic traditions, it'll be more about doing ceremonies and rituals that help you connect to that time and place within the wheel of the seasonal circle. And it will be about getting the blessing of the spirits and the ancestors that are there, and getting them to guide you through what you're going to do, rather than using your will. It was a different process.
Do you touch the force and power of nature in a way, or a spiritual thing, or both?
Yeah, I mean the sort of Wicca Druid thing is more about thinking into the nature. It's the idea that it's already perfect as it is, and sometimes we can go blind to that, you know, and open our eyes, increase our awareness and appreciation of that. Whereas, you know, the more Western magical tradition is more about like give me gold from Neptune, the alchemists and
Yeah,
stuff. Although that again could be interpreted in different ways, but so I think these days we're more leaning towards a shamanic idea of what we're doing ceremonially, rather than specific invocations of something.
Oh, so they're coming to your side of the stage?
Not just mine, but I think we're all leaning towards that a bit. Paul's leaning towards Tibetan Buddhism a bit more. Jazz is interested in lots of things, from Sufism to Tibetan Buddhism, but they're still into that stuff. Julie's into his gematria and all that, that's, I think when they're together, then it's a safer place to go when you're asking for the blessings, or rather than you commanding something. It's a different part of the ego you're using, so I think I find that more comfortable. I mean, obviously they have their own private practices, and I don't know what Chaz is up to when he's doing that, but I think it's leaning towards that as well. We're kind of in sync with that very much, I think.
Do you see that with Druidism, that's like a British shamanism, or is it different?
Druidism, yeah. Druidry is the native indigenous traditions, shamanic traditions of these islands, as is Wicca. And they go very closely hand in hand.
And what is your fascination with that because you happen to live here, or is it just something it doesn't matter where you live, they're the closest to what you kind of feel?
Well, ironically, it was when I first went to India and I was doing the ashrams, and I had this thing of I could do maybe a 7-week retreat, I could do a 3-year retreat. I've got that in me to do that. And I was doing a retreat, and in that retreat I was thinking about doing one in Nepal that was going to go on for a few years. And I had a very profound meditation in that, and what came out of that was that my path wasn't in India, but back here in these islands. And I thought, wow, that's real. I've come all the way to India to be told to go back again. But as soon as I came back, through a series of serendipities, I joined a Druid order. This was about 88, 89. And that began a serious mystery school education towards, what that is. And, that was where my path led.
And how much did that change you as a person?
Oh, irrevocably,
Did you finally feel like you were at home in a way? Literally, geographically, and spiritually.
Yeah, and also my father's family are from Ynys Anglesey in Wales, which is like home of the Druids. I've just been.
You've just been up there.
I've just done some poetry performances there.
And was that like a very connecting trip?
It was amazing because I had my family there, and we had serendipitously there were some other Druids from other orders that allowed me to go into these locked chambers and do some ceremonies in there, and then I'd be performing on stage 5 gigs in a row, all with a different band every night, people I hadn't met, from harpists to guitarists. Some of them I had, but a lot of them I hadn't. And it was really like the Demo Suzuki canting, and just get up there and do it with the poetry. I had people in tears every night and coming up to really moved. And for me to reconnect to my own poetry in the place of my ancestors physically and metaphorically was mind-blowing. I mean, 2 weeks earlier I've been doing the Albert Hall with Killington.
Yeah.
But that 60 people in that little chapel in Holyhead was just mind-blowing. And so, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I hadn't done that. And I think it's important to find the expression of your spiritual self, I mean, I think it's easy to think you don't need that, but without it, I don't know how you're going to find any kind of meaning or purpose to what you do. What that gave me was a lot of meaning and purpose to what I did and what I'd done, and that put it into a context of, okay, this is, and then what's your job? Inspire people to do the same, it's been hugely important. Nevertheless, I'm not evangelical about it. I'm like, don't join, join or don't join, do your thing, do whatever you want. But I think to find that sense of completeness, sense of self, who you are, where you are, what you're doing, context of that, meaning and purpose to it, you've got to find a spiritual connection. Do you have a spiritual connection, or are you?
I'm more in the nature side. I'm sort of
Right. Well, that's very true.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
very true.
I've done a Druid ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the Tower of London.
Okay.
I think it's your Druid gang, but you weren't there that day.
Oh.
It was about 6 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went to mate who's Matt, who actually knows you, but they wrote me into it to hold up the thing with it down at the end of that. It's fascinating day out, actually.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, the order I'm involved with, we would do ceremonies, they still do them on the solstice on Glastonbury tour. And there'd be 500 people doing a ceremony on top of the tour just before sun. I mean, just mind-blowing.
This was about 200 people by the Tower of London.
It's an amazing thing, isn't it? I've got a theory that as soon as you form a circle with even 3 people, you create that universal portal, the interdimensional gateway that will go beyond where you actually physically are. Things
Do you not feel completely tuned into the violence and the beauty of nature just by being in nature?
I think so, yeah. I don't think you
You don't need the circle or the ceremony.
No, you don't. You don't necessarily need anything. But because we live in a very difficult societal, controlled world, without a structure like a ceremony or
to break on through again, basically.
It's going to be hard to do that on your own. And I think when you do it with a covenant or an order, you've got the strength of all of that and all that legacy that goes with that to help you kind of get through it and understand what it is.
Well, what I found interesting when I was writing the book about a lot of bands, a lot of people do sing and talk about spirituality, whether they really anti-God and anti-spiritual, which is actually a powerful spiritual feeling in a sense, isn't it? Or people like say you on your spiritual quest, or like Nick Cave, who's ended up being, a Christian, isn't he? So these are all spiritual trips, and probably more than any other music scene I've ever looked at. It's everybody's kind of got at least one song trying to deal with the spiritual quest in that period of time, and I find that quite fascinating. Was that something that people talked about, or something that was felt, or was it something that was there in that period?
I don't think it was overtly discussed. There was too much speed and sort of crazy rock and roll going on. But I think subliminally that was what was driving us all. Really.
Was it because punk asked a lot of questions and everyone's trying to find some kind of answer in the confusion?
The problem with punk, as much as I love punk, was that it was a reactionary movement. So once you took the problem away, you weren't left with a philosophy other than let's smash down the walls,
which is great.
So what came in with post-punk was rather than like an anarchist smashing down the walls, it was more like this is the influence of Joy Division, I think, and the French poets, the Romantics, which was more of an introspective look into the self and an authentic look into the self, an existential look of how we cope with living and the imminent arrival of death eventually, and how to marry that out with creativity and art.
Is it marrying it, or is the creativity the kind of the quest, or part of the journey?
Yeah, it's chicken and egg, isn't it?
Trying to work out which way around.
Yeah, I think the art, the stories, the first books. There's an element like all even the vampires, all that. There's a sexual undercurrent to it all as well. So when you're in a situation where you're in a very sexually repressed society, like the UK in the late 70s, then those books like that just give your imagination wings and can somehow you can dream those beautiful experiences even if they're not proposed. And if you're in a club and everybody's wearing black and you're listening to Ian Astbury go on about something, that can somehow help a little bit towards helping you find that in your own way, you know, even though it's not going to be explicitly put in front of you on a silver plate, you might then go on to explore other things.
So partially the role of an artist is to open the doors, apart from just playing bass and producing loads of records, or is that a way of opening the doors in a way, or exploring, or...
That's a lot of questions in that one sentence. The role of the artist. I think if you really look at the role of the artist, you go back to the shamans again. All the arts go back to ceremony and ritual, and those were the first artistic expressions. You know, whether it's in Delphi in ancient Greece or Druid rites in Stonehenge 5,000 years ago. The visionary, oracular nature of the poetry and the shamans. That these things, even though it looks like we're in the 21st century here, those things are just a tiny bit below a very thin veneer, and they're still very much there. You still very much hear it when we look back now, and we can discuss Jim Morrison and Ian Curtis and their lyrics and what they. Of course, that's what they were talking about, and it's the same stuff, you know. And those are our community teachers of the day, you know, who by just expressing their own experience help to facilitate our own, you know, and give us the confidence to do the same. And that's been a very important role of those poets and shamans.
It's part of one of the things I was trying to do in the book, you know, that every generation is trying to deal with its blues or whatever in a way. So in the 19th century, it would be the poets, it would be the painters, and in the late 70s, early 80s, because music culture was the number one culture, and that's the place you would express it. Now it's probably on the social media, so it just changes with whatever the creative technology is, but the feeling always stays there, doesn't it? Maybe social media, but that's just a platform. It's not anything in itself, is it? If you drop ideas into it, it can open doors, I suppose, can't it? Obviously not as powerful as a high decibel gig, which is very shamanistic, sort of ritualistic sort of thing. That's pretty obvious what I'd say, isn't it?
But that's often where kids find their tribe now. It's true people on social media, people on niche.
I mean, were you always trying to find your tribe? Because I feel you're probably a tribe of one, aren't you?
Yeah, well, that was the thing, you know. We thought, you know, we'd never been in a club that would let us, that sort of thing. You know, so we find our tribe, but then we say, no, we don't want a tribe. We want to be on our own. They're constantly, but of course, all those subcultures, it's all about community. It's about building community, finding community, breaking down communities, creating new ones. Creating a reality that, you know, fits the way you want to live your life, and that's what it's really all about.
Or is it trying to smash down the reality in punk style, but trying to get beyond that to a truth or your truth? Is that what the whole quest was?
Well, I think it's often, especially with post-punk, to destroy to create was very, very. It seemed like a very good philosophy, and it didn't just come from the Goths. I mean, that was a thesis of Darb, you know, and Lee Perry and all that. So the idea of breaking down those sacred cow walls, you know, that was a big part of punk. Post-punk was being yourself, doing it the way you wanted to do it without anybody else's approval. That's why I think that's like more powerful today, because that's a message, you know, young people always need to hear.
You think everything's got almost back to the beginning now, but more Apollonian and less Dionysian?
It's certainly more conservative, isn't it? And I think, if you look at the populist agenda of the last 5-10 years, the way the world's going, politicians banding nuclear war threats around again, seriously, I mean, that needs to be taken on with it by artists and addressed and vigorously, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's funny how you talk about the people tripping the room and have to be one person who's like the grown up in the room, and it's ironic that the politicians become the children in the room and you become the grown up. It's upside down.
I never could have believed anyone 30 years ago telling me that we would have the politicians we have in power now, and just how irresponsible and without any humanity, how self-serving they've become, and how much they undermine our own integrity with their absolute blatant lies, and expect us to just eat it up, and it's shocking, we do somehow, but sometimes we don't, and I think the point of community and stuff like that is to give us and inform us of what we have to do individually and as a community to resist that, big government or even small government propaganda machine, and create an alternative that has meaning and authenticity and is based in basic humanity and simple human principles.
Yeah. Nice place to end that. Yeah. So, any questions? Any questions before? Start here. Yeah. You have to shout because it doesn't the mic will reach. I
brought it with me, just something you might amuse you. My enemy reader's poll thing that I fielded in 1980 and never sent off. You got the best haircut, best band, Killing Joke. But I can remember filling in, trying to be a bit varied. It would have been best drummer, Paul Ferguson, but I didn't know his name. I only knew yours. Anyway, yeah, you got best haircut, best Killing Joke. I've got it with me actually. I was hoping you might have a look.
You can send it in now.
Yeah. But anyway, that's probably what I don't know if you won or not, but I've got it here with me.
Did you win best haircut in 1979?
I doubt it. I mean, I don't know. I didn't even consider it.
A bit trivial, sorry, but
yeah,
I was only 15.
No, I take it as a compliment. Yeah, thanks.
You used to look like Sid Vicious on acid. That was your kind of look.
Wow, the Sid Vicious thing came because just prior to Killing Joke, I had a band with John Lydon's brother, Jimmy, 4B2, and we made a couple of records. One of the lads, still a fantastic record, and and the idea then was like a marketing thing to get the band a deal. Was the manager was like, look, we got Jimmy, you look like Sid, pretend you're Sid's brother, we'll get a deal, and we actually did get a deal with Highland Records on the back of that, and but then it took me a while to shake that off, but it was worth it. It's a really good experience. And I actually love Sid. I never met Sid. I never saw the Pistols live properly. But I love the Pistols,
of course, Pill, which is...
And Pill, was even better in a way. But
I think really big influence on a lot of what
huge.
Well. I mean, it's the darkness and the space in the music, the mixture of dog and disco and everything.
Yeah. The whole can element of that.
Well, you used to go to Guns Grove, where John Lydon lived.
Yeah, I was hanging out there because I've been in the band with Jimmy, and I lived around the corner in Earls Court. Became friends with John. He was very warm and kind, and I'd just sit and hang out in his living room, and he'd have Donettes, Living Dom, and coming through, and Slits, and they're all a lot older than me, and I'd just be quiet in the corner rolling a joint and just taking notes really. And but when I look back now, it's just a huge experience for me. Time is
no, that was the epicenter, I imagine.
Yeah, and that vibe I remember, distinctly. And that's a lot of things about being in the studio of bands and artists, it's just a vibe. It's not something it's that Dionysian. You can't specifically, rationally describe what it is, but it's a feeling, and you can take a while to develop a sensibility for those feelings. But that's what I've really done in many ways.
As a producer.
And just as a cat who's trying to learn what it's about, I lost it with LSD because I thought I was too normal. that I'd never lose it. I said, there's no way I'm going to go where Jim went and those kinds of things. I'm just too straight and normal. And that made me cavalier. And then when I did get there, I was like, whoa, actually, yeah. So, you know, all of that is just to help find out who I was, really.
Okay, there was a question there.
Well,
Oh, no. All right, okay. Is that Leslie? Yeah. You'll come to you in a minute. We'll go to Leslie first, yeah. No, Leslie first, because women first, then we'll come to you. Yeah.
You tell them, why did you write the book?
Hey?
That's a good
Why
one.
did you write the book?
Yeah.
Well, because I wanted to, I thought it was a scene that was very misunderstood. I thought a lot of the music in the book wasn't taken seriously enough. I think bands like Bauhaus used to get awful, terrible press when they came out. And to me, they're one of the greatest art rock bands this country's ever produced, and I wanted to celebrate that, really. And I wanted to contextualise it. I want to try and explain what it was, and there's such a cliched idea what goth was, and it's like punk as well, and everything just gets really reducted into a simple cliche. But they're actually much more fascinating and layered and nuanced. So that was the answer. Yeah.
That's a very good answer as well. Yeah. And let's give it up for John.
Thank you. Your question now? Yeah.
Yep. What was the band? Was it brilliant that you said was the second band you had?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which had Jimmy Corty and Ben Watkins. Yeah, it was an interesting band.
It's decent, really decent.
It was definitely, I think it was a stepping stone to something that went next, wasn't it? It never resolved into a full thing, did it?
It was an experimental lab, really, for me, and it was a lot of fun. And you know, with any lab experiment, you're going to go, you know, not everything's going to work out the way you want. But what it really led to was, it really helped me learn how to produce records and work with different artists. And I think really what came out of it straight away was KLF and the Orb, you know. So those two things in themselves made a lot of sense of it. And it's just one of those weird things that it's what was around, what came out of it that made sense of it rather than it itself. But the records I'm proud of. I mean, they're experimental, they're different, but they're great. You know, that was part of the spirit of the time.
Maybe one day you could finish it.
It was part psychedelic, really, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, we're very inspired by, you know, psychedelia from Hendrix onwards. I remember us doing a cover of Purple Haze at Brixton Rock Against Racism. That went on for about 20 minutes.
In a Purple Haze.
Yeah. And it only worked because we didn't have a guitarist, I think. So it was the two basses doing the first one. Yeah, it was great. And, you know, I didn't know what we were trying to work towards. But again, it's coming back to that idea as a community. Came out of, a lot of us were living in squats at the time, and diverse people coming together to just see what you could do.
Which is great, it's been done.
Yeah, it's directed at both of you, but first of all, you may remember me from outside you. Anyway, I was wondering what poetry or printed do you have in your pipeline? Because I know it's wonderful to see things online. I love the whole of the open. So I'm wondering if you have any new printed writing. And also, John, I was wondering, do you believe that poetry still has value, or is it a bit of a dying art that people only ever felt they had to read because it was taught in school? Poetry.
I think the power of the word is everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be in poetry, it could just be when you're talking and speaking.
It's like I actually taught myself archaic old English language. And the
You should be a player.
improvements thereof to, you know, add to my work, because I feel things can become repetitive and important. And I like to, I think some of these things should be brought back. They're beautiful, they're powerful, and they have an elegance that seems to have been diluted and lost.
I think you've kind of answered the question in the question. Well, there is an answer actually, because she's asking me if you've got a book. Well, he has brought a book of poetry, and it's with my books on the way out, sort of thing, isn't it? So you'll be signing them after.
Oh well, there's only a last few left from the Welsh tour I did, so there's only about 10. But Slaves of Venus, I'd say the written word poetry. What I love about it is the limitations that come with it. Coming from being a record producer where I can put 200 tracks together to create this incredible world, to just letters on a page, it's a very stark, basic medium, really. I mean, how do you find that compared to making music yourself?
Well, I write lyrics, and I love it's my favourite part. And I love the sound of words and the textures of words, but I often wonder if anybody else gives a fuck about them. but again, that doesn't really matter, does it? Because it's for you, isn't it?
I think so. You should be,
But the sound, the rhythm, I actually prefer the spoken word and the sound of words to the written words. I think when you hear things, the way people talk. So when she was asking the question, her accent, was completely intriguing. I love accents and I love ways to talk and twist words round.
They become melodic, especially in Ireland and Wales.
Well, that's the thing, when people tell people they can't sing, it's ridiculous because everyone can talk. Everyone can talk. The voice is melodic, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's something about the written word I love as well. And being able to, to have a book of poetry. It's like a little flash of birdsong can just suddenly transpose and transform your mood instantly. And if you're on a train or a bus and you just look at one line of poet that talks to you, I mean, that can have a similar effect.
It's interesting because another thing that runs through the book is the sensuality of goth as well. Every sense was covered, wasn't it? And so we talked about that there, the sound of poetry, the visual impact of poetry, the sound of the music, all those things. But I think I would argue probably more than any other musical genre, it's probably the most sensual in a sense.
But and I think romantic as well. I mean, people think, okay, you've got Sisters of Mercy, but then you look at Kate Bush, Hounds of Love. That's totally Byron-esque. Even Wuthering Heights, totally Dionysian, Gothic-inspired music. It just doesn't sound like the Sisters of Mercy, but actually, what she's talking about is very similar to some of the other artists that we.
I put her in the book, even though she's not, as you say, goth. But that's putting boundaries up to irritating. But she is covering the same. And probably more. Sensual ways, isn't it?
And of course Bowie was doing the same thing before God.
Well, he's a precursor. I mean, if it's Jim Morrison, then Bowie.
There you go.
It's a very simplified route, isn't it? So, any more questions? You've had your question, Leslie. You've had your question.
I got a question for you both.
Afterwards, we're here afterwards.
In the old days, there was all these different factions you could join up with. It was like part of your identity, part of you. Now there's fuck all. Can you tell me why you think that is?
Well, you have goths and skins and Teds and now everybody's everything, aren't they? But actually it is the age of the niche now, so if you want to be a cookie monster, then you can find your tribe out there somewhere, they're there. But I think culturally, it doesn't work the same way like as a uniform, but every young band I work with, or my kids' mates who are doing bands, I'm like, find a dead pub on a Monday night, start your own night, and create a scene, and build a community. Because without that, you got nothing. That's what it's all about. And for those people, as soon as you have the courage to put yourself out there, those people come. And that hasn't changed. That's always the same as it's ever been, and always will be. And it comes back to the same. They are out there. They may not be all wearing the same look anymore, but the passions are there, and you will find them. I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think in fact, why trap yourself in a genre?
Well, there's that as well. And the irony is, like with teenagers, you have to destroy your parental identity with one that you think's your own. And it used to be like heavy metal, Iron Maiden, or Killing Joke t-shirt or whatever. it would be somebody else's identity that you would take on to find your own in a weird way. And there's a lot of paradox in that. But I think that is part of the process. Kids are a bit more knowing now, so they're not like so ready to invest in somebody else's trip. And that's maybe not such a bad thing.
And also, I think because there's so much available, that it's because it was always a bricolage culture, everything was chopped up, but now there are 10 things being cut up, it's about 100,000 in it. So, like you say, you can be a cookie monster with a. But like, when you were actually a punk, weren't you, with your punk trousers and your teddy boy top? So that was a very primitive version of what you be now. Question.
So, John, we saw you probably 5 years ago. You did a talk with Andy Sex Gang and Rosie from March Violence. You were talking about writing the book. Got really excited. It's taken me a little while.
Yeah, so longer than that.
So, interestingly, we've got Kathy Unsworth coming out. Him from The Cure's got one. Were you waiting for the time with the clouds aligning? And is it that Goth's got its moment? Is it next for Pop Will Eat Self and Carter and One Star?
No, I actually just managed to finally finish the book. It took me all that time. Finished the edit, got ready to put it out, and still there's 2 other books. I mean, I guess that's just life, isn't it? Actually, I could have finished it 2 years ago. I wish I had, but life gets in the way, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's what happened.
So it's all coincidence.
It's coincidence because I think. Because any kind of culture that's a strong culture, that any time you put a spotlight on it, it's always there anyway. So if this had come out 2-3 years ago, it would have been the same level of interest in it, maybe, because it was already there in a sense, you know. So I don't think it's got, just because of Wednesday, doesn't suddenly get a high watermark. It's just there anyway, isn't it? So it would have happened, but I wish I'd been quicker. What question?
Yeah, so I'm really interested by the way the acid, hi you, John, by the way, the acid current has presented itself there. It only strikes me that goth is a kind of like post-factor psychedelia. And it's a dark psychedelia, like in the kind of post-industrial salons, and that kind of really hit me. And it totally struck me in my own life. I've had 2 kind of moments like that. The first time I took acid, as you were kind of talking about your experience and how it opened your mind, I saw The Cure in Canterbury in 1986, and I took a white lighting. Had a sort of very mind-only experience of 2 thunderstorms on my side of the pyramid of age, again bringing out the crowd in, and met people with the shoulder of the dawn connection and all that. The following day, I was given my second acid trip by Andy, who was a big Sisters of Mercy fan, who introduced me to the earliest Sisters of Mercy EP with the Convert of Emma, who then went on to do the lights for The Cure and many other bands as well, be a bit of a star of light, be a Way Society band and all that. So there is a huge current connection between psychedelia and you were right pointing out and all the kind of other shamanic traditions and goth, which maybe in the way that it's been mediated has been obscured. I think you really brought it out here.
I wrote that in the book actually, you know, like saying The Cure's Pornography is an incredibly psychedelic record, but it's not Paisley pattern. It's monochromatic psychedelia, isn't it? But all the more powerful for it.
I could often overlooked elements of goth. I think generally it's David Tibet. I don't know if he's in the books. I've not read it, but again, like I was saying about that traditional psychedelic folk music, that was the direction he went in with Current 93, and really owned it now. I mean, and he brought Shirley Collins back recently, and responsible for some huge things. So, as well as going through all of his stuff with Psychic TV.
It's quite amazing stuff he's done actually.
Yeah, it is.
You're busy.
Yeah, I actually played on the first Current 93 album, I think. Went in 81, 82. And we've remained friends ever since. But yeah, he's a great source of inspiration, I think, and has retained, a continuity and yet changed completely as he developed as well. Amazing.
So in a sense, it probably was the second psychedelic age, but a darker one. So one more question, but it has to be a different person to give people a turn. So, or I'll have 2. So Come back to you in the corner.
Hi, yeah, sorry. Is there something in the water in the north? Dark times, dark culture. I have to ask, I'm a northerner.
Yeah, well, you know there is. There's always some different waters in the north. I think, well, I probably meant to talk about that before, but the idea that it was independent, people were actually doing stuff outside the capital city narrative, weren't they? They were doing stuff not dictated by the music business. That's one of the reasons why Goth got slagged off a lot, because the music papers couldn't control it. It was people doing it anyway, weren't they? And I got really fascinated by these people working in isolation like that. So let's say Sisters in Leeds. I know Leeds is a really big city now, but then these northern cities and Manchester felt like sort of, they weren't backwaters, but they felt like backwaters. But when you think stuff like Druidry came out of Manchester, or the Bunnymen coming out of Liverpool, and people's reactions to punk going off and misinterpreting punk and coming out with their own answers, because there was nothing else around that could actually sort of influence them, was there? They were working in isolation. I think that was important. And I think people also, to be that defiant, to be into a culture you get beaten up for by dressing up, which I wrote about in the book. As you know, coming from the north, it could get a bit rough sometimes if you didn't dress like everybody else. And you think of people like Pete Burns going around Liverpool in the 70s, looking absolutely amazing, And when people would shout stuff at him, he'd just stop and scream, look at them, they would run off, because he was not camp at all, was he? He was pretty hard, and he could take that shit. I think that those people are amazing. I think those people definitely sparked the culture of those towns, and the people went with them. So I think that sense of isolation was important, because you could fester away without anybody sort of influencing you, and I think that was really important. But it's a very different experience when you're in London, isn't it? Or did it kind of feel like that as well?
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, in Manchester was actually the centre of trade, wasn't it, for hundreds of years? I went all over the world with cotton, and government may have been in London, but there wasn't much industry in that way. And we were a lot, we're southern softies, compared to the hard-working northern, things. So, I don't know, I think the weight of the mills, the dark satanic mills and all those red brick mill buildings in Salford, and you'd be like, oh, that looks dark and heavy, and there was a feeling of like, well, embracing that almost emotionally, but also transcending it with their art and music.
So when you toured Joy Division, culturally did it feel very different? Do you think, did they feel very northern, you felt very southern, or did it just not matter at all?
No, I mean, like, Joy Division were very sophisticated. I mean, Ian Curtis.
Well, Ian was, but Hookie's...
Yeah, the others were. It was Ian's band, really, wasn't it? And where he was coming from intellectually, was way beyond us, all the rest of Joy Division. He really understood the art of it, and it was a much more sophisticated thing. I think there was a Doors element to that as well.
For him, definitely. Hookie, I don't think I believe he said he never heard the Doors, and he played records. Hookie always said, "Fuck me, we do sound like the Doors."
Yeah.
But I think what's fascinating about people like say Hookie is that his bass lines are incredibly sophisticated.
Oh yeah.
But he had no idea where they came from. And I love that. I think that intuitive brilliance is something in it.
For all of us, I mean, some of the best records I ever made, I made before I was 20, and I didn't know anything then. So there's a lot to be said for not knowing what you're doing. But you still need someone in that circle that does, and I think you need an Ian Curtis who's turning you on to Herzog movies and making you listen to Iggy Pop, things like we all need mentors to turn us on to stuff, and Ian was very much, a good mentor in that way for the other members of the band.
And probably on his own before the band.
Oh yeah. I mean,
there's that picture of the Mont de Marsan Festival in France in 1975 with a Cluster t-shirt on. One, Cluster were pretty obscure. Two, there weren't very many band t-shirts in 1975, was there?
That's right.
I mean, you look at that picture and think, wow, he looks like the future already.
That's right. And he knew that, where everyone else at the time was still trying to sound like three-chord blues punk, like the Pistols, he was going towards Can, and we were doing something similar, but maybe not for such, intellectual reasons, but we would, you know, we were drawn to that, and when also with what Pearl were doing, of course, had a similar resonance. Yeah, and I think, John was an intellectual genius as well, Lydon, wasn't he? And so, you know, but very different from Ian. So, but both of them had their visionary, oracular thing, you know, where they would, you know, channel this stuff through. So
it's interesting that in the north you get these people, and often now when you think about where do they get the information, how do they find this stuff? Because I know there was like comic shops and underground papers, and it wasn't that easy. It's not like now you just Google it all, is it?
No, but you had stronger communities of teachers and students, and they turn you on to this stuff, and you see, it's one of those osmosis things. Once you tap into something like Can, and you suddenly meet people who are into Can, you know, it's a weird one. But I'm sure that happened there. Yeah. John Peel, yeah.
How did you get to work with Connie Plank?
We were talking about this earlier. We'd actually gone, we were checking out other producers, and we went to see Martin Hannett at Strawberry Studios. And John was saying, I don't know if that would have worked, you know, maybe it wouldn't actually, you're right. But I actually love Martin Hannett's production because I just loved all the reverb and stuff, his vision of it. But of course, when we met him, and when I found out that 10cc's in the I'm Not in Love was made in the same studio, that's all I wanted to talk about. And he was like, well, I didn't do that, I wasn't here then. Okay, but when did they do this? For some reason it didn't work very well. But I think we had a list of a few other producers, Martin. Trevor Horn was on it actually, and of course, who we ended up working with in the end anyway, was with Can's producer, with Connie. Connie was the only one we could actually all agree on working with.
You did a great job.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. But it's not our best album. Although a lot of our fans love it.
I love it.
But I think it's a bit dirgy, and I don't know, maybe it's a mix. It all sounds a bit. It's not what I was trying to do with the band that prior to that was this sort of fusion of disco and dub with some loud guitars, and I had to let go of that by the time we did the third album because
can you bring that bit back? I always like the disco and Druidry. I always think you're one of the greatest funk bands ever.
Oh yeah, well I'm still totally.
It's in there, and then
disco centric.
I love the groove and Killing Joke.
Yeah. But the groove kind of went away a bit on the third album. We got rid of choruses, and it just became this sort of blunt, dirgy sort of pile juggernaut.
It sounded great when you were 18.
Maybe, yeah. I never thought it was a great album, but working with Connie was great. And I met Holger Kazuki, and actually what was amazing on that trip was Wobble was over doing an EP with Jackie Liebridge and Holger, and he was only 22, and I was, he must be about 23, he's a bit older than me. I was like 21. I was like, Jesus, Wobble's working with Jackie at 22, I better get busy. You know, I really thought, shit, I've got to, you know, speed up a bit.
The final question from this corner, yeah.
Hi. Yes, whether it's the inclusiveness or the androgyny or something else entirely, what do you hope that new bands now take from the old days and carry into the future with goth?
Again, I think the answer's in the question. I think if they take the androgyny and they take also the style, the musical influences, which I think are very interesting, because it was never straight rock and roll, was it? It's influenced by funk, disco, dub, like you just saying, and quite a lot of the bands were. The sense of adventure, and also that embrace of melancholy, but not drowning in it, I think is important as well. I think all those kind of things, but not copying it. I think that every generation has to have its own narrative, its own soundtrack. I mean, and that's what it is, you know, people do. I think younger people now are probably more open to older musics, but I wouldn't want them to be drowned in it. You know, you don't want another 18-year-old kid version of Killing Joke, but you want maybe people to take that influence and make something completely different out of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like pop stars that are Billie Eilish, well, I mean they're pretty inclusive. They're pretty open to lots of different things going on. I mean, it's not going to be the same as the Batcave, but I'm sure they're going to get.
It's great, though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and actually, look at the influence of Bauhaus alone. I mean, Massive Attack cover Bela Lugosi live, and I've done for a while, and so many people are into that vibe now from across platform disciplines. It's taken on its own life, you know. But again, yeah, we want more artists that facilitate that kind of inclusion, you know, and can promote people to feel like they belong, whoever they are, wherever they're from. That's what we want, you know.
Or not just artists, just basically human race.
Yeah.
So, speaking of inclusion, thanks everybody for coming tonight. And,
Thank you.
thanks tonight, thank you, John. And thank you, and let's get everything big hand for John on this last piece. Our success there is going to go bigger and bigger. And it's great to talk about it. Yeah, and we're going to be signing about 5-10 minutes over there, and news book as well.
Oh yeah, Slaves of Venus, some poetry I've written. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.